Hello! I went to art school for 4 years and I'm going to show you everything basically that I learned in under 25 minutes. So, what art supplies can I get at the Dollarama? Well, the answer will surprise you. You can get these paintbrushes. Do not get the camel hair. You will cry pulling out all of the little hairs with tweezers from your painting. Do not get them, okay? These 25, that's a good assortment of different sizes. This one too. I like these colorful ones. I use them. People in art school will make fun of you, but who cares? They are dense enough to move and pick up the paint, but soft enough to blend, and that is what you want. If you get these foam brush sets, you better be in kindergarten because that is who they are for, but not for fine arts. Nuh-uh. Nope. This little artist brush set is pretty good too. Oh my goodness. You better put at least one coat of acrylic paint on top of it to fill in the holes because they're like potholes in Montreal. You know, like it takes forever to fill it in. But I will be buying the little canvas boards. Do not get these ones. Please do not. These little palette knives, just from looking at them, I think that they're going to rust if you put them in water for too long. These brushes, they seem like they would add texture to your painting, which is always nice. But again, I feel like they would come off in the painting and would make you cry. So don't get this one. But if you get this one, the brown one, I think that is, it's thick enough to do what you want. And these are always so cute too. It's a good price. You want a variety of different brushes. I like this. This is good for oil painting when you have your solvent. You could just put the little lid on and it's great. And it's perfect for washing your brushes. If you have these paints, do not bring them to art school. They are more for arts and crafts. And that's a good palette. These are called tempera paints. They are not watercolor. It works the same as watercolor, but it is not as vibrant as watercolor. It is more chalky and kid-friendly. And these graphite pencils, I promise you, are just as good as the $10 ones from Michaels. So what art supplies should I get at Michaels / Merr Dessert? They have individual brushes and you can test them to see if that's what you want. Yes, very nice. These are oil paints. This is $7.99. That's what I normally get. You don't need to go fancier. But if you want a color so bad that you want to eat it and Artist Loft does not have it, then you move on to the next aisle and the next one. But look at the prices. Those are crazy. You do you, but I don't see the use. All right, if you are doing watercolor, you need to get watercolor paper. Please do not get the printer's paper. You will be devastated at the results. I promise you. Your paper will be all wrinkly and crinkly. And this watercolor paper does not do that. It absorbs your water like a sponge and it retains its shape. It is very thick and this is what you want, okay? It's all the same thing. You get whatever you want. Boom, there's another one. It's cheaper and it's on sale. Score. Also, there's palette paper. If you don't have a palette or you don't want to invest in one or whatever, if you don't want to wash your palette with solvent or turpentine or water, wash it down, you just tear off the paper, you crinkle it up and throw it out and bada bing, bada boom, that's it. And that's canvas paper if you don't want to invest in a canvas. Also, I'm a dodo and I forgot to show you where to get watercolor paints. It's right here. This is the watercolor I recommend from Michaels. You can get the set with the palette already there. If not, then I recommend the value pack. What's great is that you don't waste. If you have like a little palette, you can let your paint dry out and like 6 months later, you can add water and it'll be just as fresh, just as vibrant and beautiful as when you first opened it and squirted the paint out. If you want to do oil paintings, then you need to use solvent. You cannot use water, unlike acrylic and watercolor. You need this. I think I got this with a coupon at Michaels, I think. I have one of these jars. I think it was $5 also from Michaels. If you want quality products for a cheaper price, get Artist Loft at Michaels. It's their house brand. It's usually pretty good. In this jar, there is a little grate, and that is to help you clean your paintbrush. Acrylic. Let's show you how to do it. Something very important that I learned is that you cannot put acrylic on top of oil. You can only put oil on top of acrylic. So I am doing an underpainting in acrylic for both my acrylic and my oil demos. The acrylic, it dries in less than 5 minutes. Anyway, What really bothers me about art school is what the art teachers suggest you get. If you're going to get 3 colors to mix with, they suggest you get ultramarine blue, cadmium red, and primary yellow. And although the yellow is good and cadmium red is nice, it doesn't mix really well. It doesn't make the nicest colors. You do actually want quinacridone red because it's a little more magenta. See how I'm blending this? The ultramarine blue is a beautiful color. I love it. But when you mix it with anything else, it turns your paint to crap. It turns it black and ugly. Like, look at this green. Does that evoke inspiration? I don't think so. Look at that. It's ugly as heck. The red and the yellow is okay, but look at all the colors that touch the ultramarine blue. And I'm just blending this just to show you that whenever you mix your colors, you lose the vibrancy. So here's what you should get. Cyan or phthalo blue, quinacridone red and or primary magenta, primary yellow or even cadmium yellow, doesn't really matter. And you'll need lots and lots of black and white. Those are the primary colors that you should get. But if you see any other colors that you love, you should get that because the companies are better at mixing the colors than you are. See, look at this purple. Look at that. It looks like it comes from the bottle. But it's so much better. And look at this green. Look at this green. Ah! Okay, so I'm a dodo, and I totally forgot about the yellow. So it's just this little unblended box. But that just shows as a testament of how we read images. And this might help you in your painting. Think of it. We read left to right, top to bottom. And it's the same way as we look at our images. The first thing we see is top left, and our eye naturally scans the rest of it all the way to the bottom right. So if you are going to focus on one part of the painting, let it be the top left. It'll seem like you're a better painter than you actually are. But see, look at this. If you use the cyan, look at that green. Such a comparison. Look at the colors, children. The colors. So much better. Do it. Okay? Do it. And here's just a close-up. I want to eat almost every color in this wheel. Okay, so how to paint acrylic. So everything dries within 5 minutes. So I'm painting really fast. And normally you have to mix all of your paint on your palette before putting it on, but I was running out of time. So I'm not mixing much. Oil paint. That is solvent. It says odorless, but it still has an odor, and you should do it in a ventilated space. And I filled it up just until the brush line, so I could still dilute my brush there. And you definitely want to do that because oil paint is very dense and it goes a long way. And if you don't dilute it with turpentine or solvent or whatever, it will take up to 3 weeks. But see, I wash my brush between colors. Always wash your brush. Always. There you go. And I'm mixing, and you see, look at that. It's so much brighter. See, same green. Yellow is beautiful. I love yellow, but it is very weak. So if you wanted to hide something, if you wanted to cover something up with yellow, good luck, girlfriend. Because look, I tried to cover up the writing, and it barely covers it. Paper towels are your friend. But see, when you mix too much, you lose the vibrancy. All right, if you cannot open one of your paints, use a lighter and it loosens things up. And if that doesn't work, dip it in the solvent and off it goes. For this, I'm using very light paint and letting the underpainting shine through, and that is acting as the shadow on the vase, if you can see. And it's great, and I wish I kept it, but I'm a dodo, and I made a mistake, and I painted over it. See, you need to learn when to stop painting, when something works. Do as I say, not as I do. But see, for this, I put magenta on the bottom. I blocked out what I wanted to block out, and I'm not putting any pink I'm just putting white, and see, it blends on the canvas itself. See, now it's too much white, so I want to add a little bit more value. I'm putting more magenta, but it's blending with the pink, so it's all kind of becoming this little pink mess. Whoops. Eventually I go over it with a bigger brush to blend it a little bit more, or to make it more blurry, to be honest. So then you can't see that it looks like a drawing. You know what I mean? And that's my face that I forgot to push the record button, and you missed all of the background. Here's a tip though, if you can see, I'm putting yellow in the flowers and in the vase because there's little reflections of color on everything. So it makes it more of an interesting painting if you add a little bit of the background in the foreground and the foreground in the background, you know, because it's all reflective on everything. And now I added a little too many highlights, and I try to fix things up on the bottom by adding more, but it just kind of blends. Adding more black or dark, I think it's Payne's Gray actually, but then see, I'm trying to fix I'm trying to fix my mistake. I add Payne's Gray on the bottom to add more value and to hide the white mistakes, but I made a boo-boo. The bottom looks a little wonky, so see, it doesn't. Painting is hard, but see, now I added too many highlights around it and it looks too cartoony. So take a paper towel, blend, blend, blend. Here you go. Watercolor. Always wet your brush before dipping it into the paint. If you don't, you will end up with that black mark just like that, and no matter how much you try to dilute that, it won't come off. You're stuck with it. So please promise me, if you're doing watercolor, always wet your brush before putting it in the paint. And then you test it, like so. So there's also something called watercolor pencils, and that's what I'm using here. They're really cool. It is a pencil crayon whose pigment is released when water is added on. So you can do a whole painting with just watercolor pencils if you like that effect. I'm not super great at it, so I'm also using watercolor paint itself. One thing that boggles my mind about art school is that if you take a drawing class, they'll accept watercolor. I don't get it. And for me, look, I'm just adding just clear water in some areas and then just a little dab of the watercolor, the just undiluted watercolor pigment, and it'll bleed into it, and it's so pretty. So you can do that too. That's a fun technique. Once it is all wet and you don't know what to do, just leave it alone, work on something else. Because if you keep playing with it, it's like a pimple on your face. You want to pop it to get rid of it, but really it'll just leave a big gash in your face, you know, big red gash that everyone will see more than that little tiny zit, you know what I mean? So leave it alone, walk away, let it dry, and then you can go back in. It's really hard to mess up watercolor. And for watercolor, all you really need is 2 brushes, round brushes, like the one I'm using, where it's round and fat on the bottom and pointed at the top. See, and this is when I continue it a few days later. You don't need to wait that long, but that's that's when I had time. And you could do layers, and you can add more value if that's what you're interested in. Pros of acrylic. It dries quickly. So it's easy to fix little mistakes. This, I didn't fix any mistakes, but I can. It is water soluble, so you can dilute the paint in water. You can wash your brush with water. It's cheaper. It's great for beginners to learn how to mix colors and to understand the medium and play with your paintbrush. You can paint on canvas paper, and if you don't want to paint on canvas board or actual canvases. And if you water it down a lot, you can imitate watercolor. So that's super cool. Cons. If you get any on your clothes, you better run to the bathroom, girlfriend, and run it underwater. Otherwise, your clothes will be ruined and it will stay there forever. It dries quickly. So if you want to blend on the canvas, it doesn't go. The paint tubes don't last very long. They can last up to maybe 10 years, but some of them dry out pretty quickly. Like acrylic is pretty good. Oil. It's really easy to blend. You can get really natural colors Very rich in color. If stored properly, oil paints can last decades. Even though that little tube might cost a bit more money, it lasts a long time. Looks professional. It takes forever to dry, so you can use the same palette the next day and the next day, depending on how much solvent you put on your palette to water to like loosen it up. It less stress, I find. Cons of oil. It blends on the canvas, so it's harder to fix mistakes. It's more expensive because of the solvent, because you want to wash your brushes before putting them away, and you want to wash your palette and all these things. It stinks. It doesn't smell very good, and you need to paint in a well-ventilated area. Canvases are expensive. Takes forever to dry, so if you're impatient and you want to give it to a friend or whatever, you might be waiting 2-3 weeks. Fans do not help. It just takes time. And this it's a little bit tacky. But this was the final result. See, with the underpainting, see the interesting, see, it has like a little outline that I wanted to keep. Kind of cool. You can see the underpainting on this acrylic as well. I put some of the pinks in the vase because it makes sense, because like the pink from the flower would reflect onto the vase. On here, it just makes for a more interesting composition if you do that. Pros of watercolor. It's cheap. It's easy to restart. If you don't like your composition, you could just pull out another piece of paper and try again. It's hard to mess up a watercolor unless you overwork it and then the paper becomes granular and it's not pretty anymore. You really learn how to manipulate the brush more with watercolor because less is more. Because less is more. You can do layers. If it's really boring at first, like what I did, or if you don't have any time, you can go back and put more layers and make it more interesting. It's a very laid back kind of painting, and I recommend doing 2 at the same time if possible, because then when everything is wet and you don't want to touch it anymore but you want to keep painting because you're having fun, do another one, and then you can switch, and then you'll have two beautiful paintings. Cons. Really hard to fix mistakes. It's hard to know when to stop. No matter what medium you're painting with, you will always need something to wash your brushes with. With oil, it is always solvent. And with acrylic and watercolor, it is always water. You will need paper towels or a rag to wipe your brushes. I always use paper towel because it is cleaner. And when I use a rag, I always end up getting it all over my clothes. So, you always need to like what you're painting. If you don't like what you're painting, it's gonna be crap. You have to love your subject matter, or love the colors you're working with, or all of the above. The thing about art school though is that they don't actually tell you how to use certain paintbrushes. You just have to watch tutorials on YouTube, I swear, and watch Bob Ross, because that's the only way I learned. You learn by talking to your peers in your classrooms. One very important thing that my teacher did tell me was you have to trust your eye. Our brain knows certain things, like your brain knows that the inside of your eye is white, right? But if you look at my eye, it's not exactly white. There's might be a little bit of gray in some areas, or a little bit of pink. You know what I mean? Like, you have to really trust your eye and trust what you see. You have to trust your perspective, and you'll get the right angles eventually. You just have to keep doing it, keep practicing, and keep having fun. Painting is so much fun. So I hope you have fun. See you next time.